And good morning. It is just a moment before 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm Ani. I'm here with Teresa.
And Drinky Bird. Drinky Bird is here.
And we have Drinky Bird. There is always Drinky Bird. I will quiet my phone down. Quiet phone.
This is now Bridge to a Better World, but right now it's Tin Toys. Much better. Mr. Dalek is just such a bully. All right, one more go round. Hi, John. Live long and prosper. Well, a Ukrainian sunflower, I see. Almost there. Almost there. Just another minute with Drinky Bird and the Tin Toy. I'll put a different tint away. Nice quiet tint away. Proper whirly gig, I guess you'd say. Come on, there it goes. Or if we can make it go faster.
Okay.
Shall we?
Yeah, but I can't get in my seat.
Okay, get in.
Oopsie doodles.
Can you get in now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, Tinto is away. Drinky bird away. Over here where you can entertain me.
Let's move that up. Good morning.
Good morning. This is now a Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa Mitchell, and this is Ani Raven Haynes. And I want to start with some very brief news briefs. For example, you heard. Okay, I think I will come over. By golly. You heard, perhaps, about the Russian troops digging trenches around Chernobyl. And it's one of those things that is kind of hard to believe. And speculation was that, the Russian troops had, growing up in Russia, had not been privy to that information because it's embarrassing to the nation, and they just hadn't been told growing up, which seems plausible. And the other thing, which I had to wonder about because the U.S. is what it is, and there was the whole weapons of mass destruction thing, and who knows, and what have you, is whether it happened at all. But apparently it did, and they did dig into the trenches. They made trenches around Chernobyl, and they also apparently burned firewood. And there's an article in Daily Kos that reveals, with photograph of a Geiger counter, that they were getting, at the very minimum, 17 millisieverts per hour, or the equivalent of 3 chest X-rays per hour, and that's before they start breathing the radioactive wood. That area isn't just a little bit radioactive, as nuclear proponents would have you believe. It's really deadly, and one of them has already died. By the way, one of
the Russian troops?
One of the Russian troops has died. Sadly, it's a hell of a way to go. And one of my little hobbies, which, since I'm still learning to row, but one of the things I like to do is to look at anagrams. And so if I put Putin and Ukraine into an anagram server, I get some interesting things. And one of the things I get is a nuke ruin pit.
Well, that's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of Chernobyl.
This is also just sort of reminding me a little bit of Agent Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks. I had no idea.
Yeah, me and Dale, hot coffee. And continuing the news briefs, three of the biggest Stop the Steal organizing groups, as you may know, got money from Charles Koch. This is from Counterpunch, but Jenny Thomas has been paid more than $100,000 by one of those groups, the Liberty Central, which is he created that, Charles Koch, and his now deceased brother David. Skipping ahead.
So she received $100,000 for existing, or she's, a paid lobbyist?
For her lobbying efforts, yeah. She
wonder if they included the lobbying efforts of the 28 texts to Mark Meadows. Just wondering.
I would presume so. That's the sort of thing she was expected to do, I would guess. And of course, we're all celebrating because KBJ is on. And I would like to see Clarence Thomas off and impeached for his involvement in that sneaky little effort to destroy democracy. And I think that Mr. Kavanaugh could also go away, and that is for a massive bribe. Whoever paid off his house and all of his debts just before his confirmation hearing should be subpoenaed to talk about that.
I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. So now, speaking of Ukraine again, a Russian official has gone on this one's all over the news program, so I won't get a source, but a Russian official has just admitted that thousands of troops are dead in the Russian effort to invade Ukraine. He said that to a UK news presenter. And then just to throw in some more good news, the famous ammo-sexual Ammon Bundy has been put in jail only for 10 days, but he's finally gone to jail for contempt of court because he disrupted a state legislature because he was,
Ammon Bundy.
he was Ammon Bundy, and he was, just really furious about masks and couldn't be arsed to put a mask on his face to save people's lives. And when he was sentenced to community service, he just blew it off. So now he has to go to jail. And that would be the news briefs. Well, actually, I could add in.
And again, I'm just going to say, so anti-freedom to have to wear a little cloth on your face for public health concerns and, keeping your neighbors safe and stuff like that. But you can control uteruses. You can control trans people. You can control, bodies, whole bodies of folks you don't agree with. And that's fine. That's nothing to do with freedom.
I have a summary of all the crap that's come down against trans people, but maybe we might get to that later because I want to get to the tofu of the matter here. And that is capitalism and Stockholm syndrome. And I just kind of want to talk about, why it's difficult to move things forward on just about anything that the people need, and even on something as existential as, not destroying the entire planet. By one estimate, there are 90,000 individuals involved in capitalism's favorite form of hide and go seek. And these experts, this nation of experts, are attorneys and accountants involved in hiding assets from taxation. Of course, this is just one aspect of capitalist hegemony, but I want to talk about it because this is something that doesn't get talked about. They are very good at it, and despite the occasional revelation, like the Panama Papers, they get better all the time. And those who track this sort of thing see that the Panama Papers barely put a dent in it. So it's still going forward. Larry Getlin, writing the New York Post, notes, quote, tens of thousands of people wake up every morning and say, how can I help this billionaire pass as much money as possible to his children with the lowest taxes? That is their mission in life. In 2015, the Global Tax Justice Network, estimated that there was between 24 trillion and 32 trillion in hidden wealth worldwide, around 10 to 12% of the world's wealth. And I have seen estimates that just from US-based multinationals, there are more than 13 trillion hidden just in the Lesser Antilles. The IRS estimates that the top 1% of households fail to report about 21% of their income. According to a new Wall Street Journal report, the tax gap, or the amount missing from the IRS coffers due to tax evasion and noncompliance from 2013 to 2015 was $391 billion a year. Collins noted that noncompliance is largely the result of the wealth hiding tricks of the richest 1%, who are responsible for about 70% of tax underreporting, end quote. And of course, all that's just guesswork because it is intentionally hidden by the richest people in the world. And if you'd like to know the details of it, their answer is simply no.
That information not for you.
It gets more complex the harder you try. It's true that one of the classic ways to have one is simply have one's banking done elsewhere, like the Lesser Antilles, but it's also possible to use a state like Delaware or South Dakota, who have decided that they could, pick up some money and some good political collections just by being whores for industry. They institute a shell game, or they shuffle unprofitable activities inside the U.S. and stash the profits elsewhere, like Ireland, where it won't be taxed. One of the more obnoxious methods is simply to buy up residential real estate and use it as a wealth holder. It used to be more common to buy vast condominiums on high-rise buildings in New York, leaving them empty, and that is still done with a substantial percentage of residential real estate that has passed into billionaires' hands has served to inflate prices so badly that even middle-class wage earners can't afford to buy a home in markets like Portland's. And if you're wondering how that works, there's a certain percentage of homes that are available at any given time. If you have a constant pressure from super wealthy people who can pay more than the asking price, that continually drives up the price. And that is what is happening right now. And if you're trying to buy a house, that's why you can't. This sort of dodgery has been going on for a long time, but it really got a turbocharged boost from Reaganism. After 2 generations now of trickle-down mendacity, most Americans are poor, and many are desperate. The Citizens United ruling, giving human and First Amendment rights to corporate fictions, means that elected government, once counted on to regulate corporations, now is an unassailable Cerberus, preventing access to political power for the masses. And it is in this environment that we face the ineluctable destruction of the environment, the carbon industry driven global warming disaster. We blame the political opposition for being too myopic, too hate driven, and too conformist to be our allies in the fight for survival, but they didn't arise from nowhere. The same corporate rulers that seek to dodge all public goods have also long destroyed education, and a population that might once have aspired to rational citizen participation and skepticism is now little more than a fascistic mob. That used to be a racist word. A fascistic mob waiting for the next dog whistle to attack Jews, blacks, GLBTQ persons, Spanish speakers, indigenous, the left, anyone who can be separated and marginalized is game. But people don't want to be roasted to death, so what is to be done? Jake Johnson writes, in Common Dreams, more than 1,000 scientists across the globe chained themselves to the doors of oil-friendly banks, blocked bridges, and occupied the steps of government buildings on Wednesday to send an urgent message to the international community. The ecological crisis is accelerating, and only a climate revolution will be enough to avert catastrophe. And so I have to ask you, did you hear about that? Did you hear much about it? And if you did you hear it from alternative media?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so to that, I just want to sort of throw in
Yes.
when the scientists are locking themselves to the fronts of banks, this is a world that I did not really dream of when I was a kid. I have to admit, I always kind of figured, naive kid, that there would be adults in the room, that would keep us from going off the rails. I was most recently disabused of this notion when it came to our response to the global response, really, to COVID. I thought that there would be an adult in the room that would coordinate an international effort. I found out there was not, and that kind of stunned me. And in the same way, I always figured scientists. We look up to scientists as a world. Scientists, they have progress, right? They help us understand the world and do things better. And no, apparently, scientists are also absolutely being shut out and ignored. And it's eye opening. It's eye opening to me.
Yeah, I mean, it
I also just want to see like Joe Schmo go up and yell, "Get a job" to a scientist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I can see it happening, definitely. They're sending their message, and what organizers described as the world's largest ever scientist-led civil disobedience campaign kicked off just days after the intergovernmental, I'm just not able to speak today.
Well,
Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its latest report detailing the grim state of efforts to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade by century's end, target set by Paris Accord. And we have the spectacle of activist groups like XR and Greenpeace getting more militant. But I think we can all agree that it will take a lot more than occasional demonstrations to force our elite masters to act.
Well, yeah. And go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
Oh, well,
I've
not
got
much
something
more
to
here.
add.
Okay. Well, as a matter of fact, I would argue that it's impossible to get our elite masters to act using the system that they've set up to prevent us being able to, exert our will. And the only way we're going to survive is by collectively deciding not to have elite masters anymore. Fat chance, right? But it's that or death.
It's the adult in the room. Let's do it. Let's have people actually realize what's going on with the elite masters. They're trying to kill us. Well, they're not actively trying to kill us. They just don't care if we die, if our lives come in between them and their profits. It's not really evil. It's just
evil.
Yeah, actually. Not actively evil.
How do you define
passively evil?
It's like it kind of depends on what's coming down.
Well, what I wanted to say is that there was a study done last week that showed for the first time, it was on living people. This has been done before in autopsies, but they weren't really sure what this meant to living folks. I'm just going to read here for a moment. Impact of plastics in our oceans, ecosystems, and even our bodies should trigger a clear response from government to end all pointless plastics. So the researchers have found microplastics in the lungs of living folks. Researchers at the University of Hull and Hull York Medical School analyzed lung tissues from 13 people who were undergoing surgery, and they found microplastics in 11 of the 13, including in tissue from the deepest parts of the lungs. A discovery that the researchers found very alarming. The airways are smaller in those lower parts of the lungs, and Dr. Laura Sadowski, the lead author of the report that was published in the Journal of Science of the Total Environment, said that she would have expected particles these sizes to be filtered out or trapped before getting that deep into the lungs. But they have a way, those microplastics, of going deeper. So as small as 0.003 millimeters could be the size of microplastics, and we're inhaling them. The most common microplastic particle that was found was polypropylene, which is frequently used in packaging, textiles, syringes, and kitchen implements.
Dear old Polly.
So there are 12 different types of microplastics found in the tissues. Male patients had slightly higher levels of the material in their lungs. 11 microplastics were found in the upper parts of the patient's lungs, 7 in the middle, and 21 in the lower. The findings support inhalation as the root of microplastic exposure.
I
So,
wonder if they harbor bacteria.
not sure. The study published in Exposure in Health last month warned that plastics pollution expected to double in the world's waterways in the next decade, and the production of single use plastics projected to grow 30% in the next 5 years. So, again, this is for capitalism, right? Because the plastics industry, it's deeply connected with fossil fuels, as we know. And B, it's just, a more cost effective way of giving you some shit that you probably don't need in the first place.
Yeah. So what you've done is you've given. Well, you're not done yet. So
No, just one more thing. The new study, Amelia Womack, who is the deputy leader of the Green Party in the UK, said that the new study should trigger a clear response from government to end all pointless plastics. The impact of plastic on our oceans, ecosystems, and even our bodies should trigger a clear response from the government. Ignoring the science of what is happening will not make that go away. And then Extinction Rebellion of Cambridge, actually, I this pretty much puts the icing on it and ties in directly with what you were saying earlier. Microplastics, says Extinction Rebellion Cambridge, microplastics are deep in our lungs. Not a surprise, but still horrifying to see it confirmed. We need to slay this industrial pollution greed machine before it destroys everything.
So what you've done is given a rational expose, and rational people with a bit of scientific background. Not a lot, a bit is enough. Some basics of social sciences, history, etc., can take that and say we need to take action on this. We're now aware of this, but we are in a post-Reagan era in which a huge portion of the population is simply helpless. In that regard, they are unarmed when it comes to rational discourse. And that brings me back to Stockholm Syndrome, what to do about this. I mean, there are some things that I
do want to say one more thing
okay, go ahead.
about microplastics and the fact that we can do this. India has a plan to eliminate all plastics, all plastic packaging. And I was quickly trying to look this up. I think it's within the next 5 years. It might be the next 10. But that's huge. For a country to say, no, you can't do one single use. It was single use plastics. So it's disposables. That's straws. It's cutlery. It's cups. It's lids for cups. It's all of that packaging, all of the blister wrap packaging, bags, all that being discontinued in India because they understand the hugeness of the problem. So
Well, that's encouraging. I'm glad to hear that. I noticed when we were at Burgerville that they were using biodegradable stuff.
A lot of people have shifted,
But
not enough.
For the followers of Ammon Bundy, let's say, and of Trump, of course, all it takes is a TV commercial on Fox News saying plastic is American, and you're more macho if you use plastic. So we've all seen the videos of Jordan Klepper getting MAGA fools to trip all over themselves logically, but they're just a visible part of the problem. Popular discourse among much of the U.S. population is frankly dead because of that phenomenon, but also because people are just busy trying to find a way to deal with a competitive society that doesn't offer enough to go around. They don't have time to think. I used to think that people put up those cartoon images of the minions, the little yellow bespectacled lozenge-shaped things out of sarcasm and or irony. I suppose someone does somewhere, but no. Apparently they're popular because people really embrace that sort of degenerate, infantilized conformity. It's a society of Stockholm syndrome sufferers. And I'm not sneering. If you can't escape that sort of submission, maybe it's best to celebrate it or to pretend to. Naomi Klein writes that the same shock doctrine that is used effectively against populations to get them to accept degraded terms of living can also be used by those populations, if united, to force change on elites. And despite my gloomy tone here, I see cause for hope. I'm just naturally an optimist. The Starbucks and Amazon
Did you say
unions,
you're naturally an optimist?
I am. That surprises you, doesn't it? She's used to hearing, absolutely dead, gloomy things from me.
I've been married to you for 27 years. There's always a surprise. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
I am an optimist, and I'm an optimist by way of looking very firmly and specifically and with a microscope if necessary at the worst things and understanding them. My optimism comes from the power to change those things through understanding. So there you have it. The Starbucks and Amazon unions used to be considered a fantasy. Now they're real. 50,000 people on Reddit are calling for a May Day week strike. The laydown movement is infuriating China's elites, and the Great Resignation may represent a great awakening that being an employee basically sucks, especially if it doesn't get you ahead in life. So maybe that sort of awakening is afoot, at least among the young. Maybe the first time a 130-degree heat wave hits DC or New York, we'll see a sudden clamor for change, or not. So what's the cure for capitalist Stockholm syndrome? That's my question for you. And more news, I noticed, I think it was on Daily Kos, that filings for new unions have gone up by a shocking percentage. I can't quote exactly how much, but there is a movement. There is a union movement afoot in the United States right now. And as I've often said, May Day is coming. I think that there's going to be some small motion. I don't know if it's going to get covered by the press or not, but I intend to just do what I can, get out on the streets, promote it, maybe put out some posters or something. Every act of defiance leads to another. And one thing I was going to say is that we don't have the option of convincing that portion of the population that is no longer capable of being convinced by rationality, by their own needs. They are convinced by appeals to resentment, frankly. And the people who are appealing to their resentment are getting better and better at it, which is why we saw Ted Cruz, even who has his Yale education, is it Yale or Harvard? It really doesn't matter to me. Going out in public at the confirmation hearings for KBJ and bringing up anti-trans rhetoric, which really had nothing to do with the confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson, but it had everything to do with promoting their agenda. And the funny thing is, anti-trans hatred is actually just a component of, it's sort of a tune-up for anti-black hatred. That's what the movement is really about. It's a whiteness movement. Its principal supporters, its overwhelming color is white, and it's about retaining or trying to restore more white hegemony. It's not that white hegemony has been lost, and that's what it's about. And also, I wanted to say that I saw, John, I saw your quote of Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I thought it was hilarious. It says, it's true. Every disaster movie begins with a scientist being ignored. That's a great quote.
It's true.
Yeah, thanks for that. So, and that is the as you used to say, Ani, the crux of the biscuit.
Hmm. Um, just a little bit more on the India plastics ban. Um, the good news is it's actually set to take effect this year, not in 10 years. It's in July. And the states of India have been told to get ready for it and to make a plan for carrying it out. But what I hadn't fully understood was there are giant loopholes that leave the biggest industries fairly untouched. It is the single use, mostly consumer plastics, as opposed to the industrial packaging. So that's it's both better than I thought in that it takes place in a couple months, and not as good as I thought in that it leaves out a lot of the larger packaging and things like that.
Well, I'm old enough to remember a world without nearly as much plastic.
Well,
I
yeah,
do remember things being wrapped in wax paper
yeah,
and tin toys like this thing, were what I got for Christmas. It can be done.
right. Helen Caldicott has been talking about that since the 90s. Um, and I remember actually when a lot of the food manufacturers switched from glass jars to plastic squeeze bottles. I'm thinking of mayonnaise and ketchup in particular. All of a sudden, everything was in these squeezy things, and this was in the 90s. And I remember taking a stack of prepaid postcards into like a Winco. Um, and my friend was with me, and we just went down the rows, writing to all the giant food conglomerates saying, as a consumer, we are dismayed to see that you have shifted from glass to plastic packaging. Please stop. And we got responses. Oh my gosh, we got so many responses. We're so glad you took the time to talk with us. We are thrilled with our new packaging. Consumers have demanded it for years. Consumers have been demanding it for years. And we got coupons, and they were ever so thankful to hear from us, obviously having not read anything except our return address,
Yeah.
so that they could send us coupons.
Our prisoners demand to be shot, and we're just trying to fulfill that.
I don't know anyone that was sitting around demanding ketchup be suddenly put in a plastic squeeze bottle.
You don't remember that?
I don't. I
The
don't.
squeeze bottle movement.
People in the streets, we demand squeeze. No, I don't
Not
remember
too
this.
bad.
Anyway, so thank you for indulging my rant on plastic.
Anytime, rant away.
What more might you have?
That's it.
Oh, well, in that case, I have a couple things.
Okay.
Um, so there is the idea of a whole new USPS fleet of trucks that's being ordered. A lot of folks are saying they need to be electric vehicles because, after all, we are dealing with um, the dual problem of fossil fuel prices and the whole idea of propping up oligarchs with fossil fuel, and perhaps the bigger problem of climate change. Right. So
That's not a small fleet. I mean, that's
no, it's a huge fleet. So that's one thing. But being built, there they are. Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson uh, actually is saying that he's not wanting them built in Wisconsin. Because why would he want something good for Wisconsin? He actually he says, I can't even say this with a straight face. I mean, he's outdoing himself. Republican Senator Ron Johnson faced a torrent of backlash over the weekend. This is from an article I grabbed from Common Dreams. Faced a torrent of backlash over the weekend for publicly admitting that he won't pressure Wisconsin manufacturer to locate around 1,000 new jobs in his home state rather than in South Carolina, which has some of the most anti-union labor laws in the nation. Johnson said, and I quote, "It's not like we don't have enough jobs here in Wisconsin." Right. He said, and again quoting, "I wouldn't insert myself to demand that anything be manufactured here using federal funds in Wisconsin."
my constituents demand to be unemployed.
He says, Um, where is it? Here we go. Um, yep. Senator Johnson said, in the end, I think when you're using federal tax dollars, you want to spend those in the most efficient way. And if it's more efficient, more effective to spend those in other states, I don't have a real problem with that.
And then he votes for 8 trillion in war spending over 10 years.
I mean, because really, he has no shame. And when it comes to their profits, your money's no object, right? And when it comes to uh, actually protecting workers, actually trying to lift people up, actually trying to improve the economy by making sure workers have protections, are being paid decent wages so that they can then spend their wages on goods and services produced in the local economy and everyone raises, right? Uh, no, no. Johnson wants to create or further the race to the bottom. That is, the race between states that will actually stand up and protect their workers
Not too
and states that
bizarre.
don't.
Not too bizarre for reality. When I was a kid, you get on the seesaw and sing. My name is Jan Janssen. I come from Wisconsin. I work in a factory there. I can't remember how the whole thing went.
It's probably not good.
No,
All right, so, um,
no, it
yeah,
just repeated itself as a silly little rhyme.
yeah, yeah. What else do I have? Oh, there's that. A couple other things that I really wanted to say before we ended, and I think mostly I'll leave it to. Well, you'd mentioned you wanted to talk about uh, attitudes around transgender laws and discrimination.
Yep, I got a stack of those.
Yeah. So um, one thing I wanted to mention is that Utah's governor, uh, who is Republican, tried to. Well, he did veto the bill, and he issued a statement that I find really uncommon amongst Republicans and really uncommon amongst folks that don't actually have trans people in their family or are not trans themselves. So I want to read it out loud. Spencer Cox, good on you. Um, of Utah's 75,000 high school athletes, sorry, of Utah's 75,000 high school athletes, Spencer Cox, governor of Utah, said only 4 transgender kids are playing, and just one of them are in girls' sports.
Satanic menace.
So he said, 4 kids who are trying to find some friends and feel like they're a part of something, 4 kids who are trying to get through each day. Rarely has so much fear and anger been directed at so few. I hope that we can work out. I hope that we can work to find ways to show these 4 kids we love them and that they have a place in our state.
That is awesome.
Yeah, Spencer Cox. Who'd known? I know. I don't know. So his veto was swiftly overturned because Utah. But Willamette Week. This is actually from a Willamette Week article that came out yesterday. Wondered if there's a similar moral courage that could be found amongst leading candidates for the governor's seat in Oregon. They found, in fact, that all Republican candidates for the governor support a trans ban on student athletes, support bigotry, and think it's just fine. Bridget Barton said, as a former 3 sport varsity athlete with a daughter who played volleyball and basketball, I know that women have worked too hard to gain equal footing in sports. People who are born as women need to compete as women, and people born as men need to compete as men in order to save women's sports. I want to know anyone that was born a man, born a woman.
It's like that joke. How many 6-foot men are born in a small town on any given day?
Right. It's, there's a lot to be said there, Bridget. Christine Drazen says that she thinks that they need to respect the individually in the dignity of every individual, but that doesn't
But
mean
everything before the butt doesn't count.
that we should accept that biological males competing in women's sports is fair or appropriate. women have fought for and earned respect and support. Betsy Johnson, who is unaffiliated, was the one person who's not a Republican, saying that um, she would support that kind of ban. So Betsy Johnson, unaffiliated, fuck right off. She says, I don't believe it's fair to force female athletes to compete against biological men. Sports should be about fair competition, not social engineering, showing a profound ignorance. Thank you, Betsy Johnson. Stan Pulliam, I gotta say, had the most nonsensical response. I read this through a few times and I wasn't entirely sure. Because honestly, if you just read it as somebody who accepts that trans folks are the gender that they identify with, this really does become nonsensical. Stan Pulliam says fairness matters. As the father of two girls, I'm outraged that second has become the new first. As governor, I will enact protections for girls to ensure they have the opportunity to play in girls' sports. I think girls should have the opportunity to play in girls' sports. All girls should have the opportunity to play in girls' sports. All boys should have the opportunity to play in boys' sports. I'm guessing that Stan and I are defining things differently. I don't know, Stan. Think about it. And then there's Bob Tiernan. He's at least brief. It is unfair to allow transgender athletes to compete in women's events. Also, kind of nonsensical, especially if we look back to the Utah example and we find that out of the four state athletes, state student athletes, only one is playing in the girls' leagues. That would mean that three trans athletes are playing in the boys' leagues. So, what do you say about trans men, Bob Tiernan? Do they exist? Unfair to allow transgender athletes to compete in women's events? Okay, what do we think, Bob? Does Bob know his ass from a hole in the ground? I think that's my
Yeah.
first question.
Yeah, well, and I have my little list of U.S. laws targeting transgender youth. But rather than go through that, I just want to say that this is, obviously a hysteria. We're not following the science on this. And if you ask me
Again, not following the science.
yeah, what is to be done about the presence of the occasional, very occasional transgender kid, and the only place they would ever make any difference is well into puberty. So the last few years of high school generally. I may be a little off on that. Maybe high school generally would apply to that, but the question scientifically should be applied. What manner of growth through testosterone has been available to this individual, or how long has this person been on puberty blockers, and have they had any transformation from that? And it's very sad for kids when they are women, and we are talking about trans women generally. That's what the right wingers are all worked up about. They hate trans women, and
and they don't seem to actually see trans men.
yeah,
There's a lot I can say about this.
Yeah,
but I'll leave that for another day.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead
they-
and walk that through in your own minds.
yeah. So they exaggerate just as hard as they can, and to their great joy, some photographs became available in the last couple of months of a swimmer who had developed quite a rib cage and was competing as a woman in swimming events. And then so that picture was everywhere, and they wanted to pretend that that's the way that it was or had to be if there was any allowance at all for transgender people. But it really, I mean, if you poke and prod, then you find pretty easily that it's really just about hatred. They don't want to hear the science. One double bind I was thinking about the other day about being transgender is transgenderism, not just as gender, but as sexuality. If I am attracted to men, then you have the TERFs saying that really I'm just a homosexual who's too embarrassed to be a homosexual, and so I have to change my own genitalia and wear a dress and alter my voice, etc., so that I can have sex with a man. And if I don't prefer men, if I prefer sex with women, well, then I'm that pervert who always just wanted to get his foot in the door in the women's room, to perv on the women So it's a double bind. It's like no matter who I'm attracted to, the real problem is that I'm a trans woman, and that's if you're not used to it, that's it's strange. It's different. It can be even at first upsetting. It's been measured before, actually. The very first uh, emotions that people have before they're aware of it, and seeing a transgender woman, reading a transgender woman is disgust. This is undoubtedly programmed as part of an exaggerated sexual binary, but that's the way it is and hasn't changed in my lifetime. So all we can do is call them out on their hatred and call for a rational scientific approach. They don't like that. So it kind of comes down to it's the same as what are we going to do about climate change when you have a truculent minority absolutely putting themselves in the way of it. Obviously, there need to be more efforts and different efforts. I'm not going to be like Fidel Castro and throw my pistol down on the table and say violencia, but there does need to be different thinking.
There absolutely does. I do want to also point out that the two candidates for governor, that would be Kotek and Kotek and old habits, they die hard. And Tobias Reed. Oh, look, I threw that piece of paper down. Anyway, they are against that kind of discrimination and came out very strongly talking about how this is, in fact, a bigotry issue, an issue around hate. They want nothing to do with it, and they are looking to provide a safe Oregon for everyone. So I just wanted to throw out that the two declared Dems for governor are on the right side.
And the Republican Party is absolutely in the hate camp now. There's just no way around it.
True.
There's no good faction.
Speaking of hate, and I don't mean to go on because I know you are usually way more newsy focused than I am, but there were a couple stories that just grabbed me this week, and you haven't mentioned this one, and I'm just going to, and that is when it comes to hypocrisy. See if I can try to make a segue. I'm trying to make a segue. I don't think I can. So forgive the abrupt turnaround here, unless the segue could be human rights in general and trying to deal with hypocrisy in general. So, as the world rushes to accept white Ukrainian refugees and asylum seekers, as well, we should. Not saying that those folks should not be accepted and welcomed with open arms. I'm just wondering about the non-white folks that are also fleeing horrific violence and escaping with their lives, and some of them are ending up on our southern border. And couldn't help but notice that Abbott, yeah, it's Governor Abbott of Texas, is looking to pull off another political stunt based on hatred, bigotry, and lies.
Oh, the buses.
And is looking to pack buses full of people, migrant people, and take them to Washington. The first stop for the buses will be the steps of the U.S. Capitol, said Abbott. So this is around Biden saying that he will end Title 42, the phasing out of the border expulsion act that Trump began. So Abbott said at a press conference earlier this week that his administration would confront what he predicted to be an unprecedented influx of migrants with his own set of unprecedented actions, because that's the kind of unprecedented duty is, including a zero tolerance policy entailing enhanced inspection of vehicles that cross into Texas from Mexico. Doing so, he acknowledged, would dramatically slow traffic into Texas. Now, as somebody who is going to be going to Mexico in May and driving my van back from my mom's house where it has spent the winter, great, Governor Abbott. I'll make sure I'm avoiding Texas like crazy because that's exactly what I want to hear as somebody driving from Mexico. Um, in fact, there's a lot of Americans that go to and from Mexico driving, oh, from El Paso and other cities in southern Texas, I'd say daily, right?
I'm sure. I want to say that this business
I say
about,
this to Teresa, who's a Texan.
well,
I was like, you've talked about southern
It's
Texas
been
and
a long time that I've been to the border
okay.
crossings, and they are very busy indeed with auto traffic. Yeah, and I want to say that this business about, I mean, the Democrats tend to say Trump's title, what is it, title or 42,
40, Title 42.
Title 42, this, and Trump's Title 42 that. No, it's Biden's Title 42 now. He could have changed that the first day he was in office. He changed a lot of things the first day he was in office.
He certainly
Fact
did.
is, it was very convenient for them. The Democrats know that plenty of Democrats are also afraid of Spanish-speaking, brown-skinned immigrants, and you know
True.
we've the solution for that is not to hold them back at the border. It's to stop being afraid of brown-skinned, Spanish-speaking immigrants with their overall ideology of La Familia and their well-known industriousness. I mean, starting with the ability to walk across nations to get here. We need those people. We know demographically that those people are needed in the United
And
States
we know that
as
there is
workers.
a human rights issue, um, first of all, that we are in part responsible for, that
Yeah.
stems back 40 years. No, I'm sorry, it stems back way further than that with the colonialization of Central and South America. Colonization. With the colonization, that is real. And then it was exacerbated with the zero tolerance um, war on drugs. And that had basically really built up the cartels. And so the US is complicit in, if not actually causing, a lot of the conditions for the suffering that is going on now, which is why there are so many people seeking asylum at the southern border. It's like we caused the problem and now we want to turn our back to it because it's
If you
politically convenient.
if you ask a politician, they'll always take the attitude of, "Oh, it was a mistake." It's not a mistake. It's U.S. policy. It's just as much policy as the Russian slaughter of civilians in Bucha.
So Abbott also says that he's further militarizing the border with additional razor wire and container blockades at low water crossings. An additional step the state will roll out, he said, would be those charter buses going to Washington, D.C., where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across the border.
You got to be
Thanks, Abbott.
pretty desperate to want to come to Oinkland in the first place, and it'd be like me trying to migrate to Britain.
Yeah. Um, so I just want to, point out that using people as political pawns is nothing new, but it's disgusting. And we have to speak out about it every time, every time. This is outrageous. He is using people who are really escaping horrific conditions. They are fleeing for their lives. And he is making a political show of them. And apparently, totally fine with pushing them into buses and driving them around for his political gain. Reacting to the changes that Abbott has talked about. Uh, there's a publication called Texas Monthly, and their senior editor, Jack Herrera, uh, tweeted, quote, I wonder if between the time that Abbott initially claimed Texas would bus migrants to DC and this press release, someone had mentioned to him that busing people across state lines against their will is felony kidnapping. And I just thought that was an interesting thing. Um,
Yeah, he's
Carry
pretending
on.
that they would be going of their own free will, as if there was any, as if the coercion that they've experienced their entire lives would suddenly evaporate when they got on a bus with Texas cops.
Right. When somebody says, get over here.
Yeah, right.
Um, so, what else? There was, well, let's just say scapegoating migrants is not the way to actually ensure the safety or security of everyone, of anyone. It's quite the opposite, as acts of bigotry um, weaken a society, right? Hate weakens societies. That's what I have. What do you, anything else? Anything else for you?
That's, as I was saying, that's it for me. And I'm curious.
Yeah,
What
but you've
was?
said that twice, and I managed to goad you into more.
Oh well, you can always goad me into more opinions, but
Okay, well,
that's all I prepared for
I
this
have
week. And
I have a lot more too. But
what was the frame of
this,
your tarot readings
I
this
was
week?
going to say the sad thing is that I have a feeling that the news that we're not getting to this week will still be sadly relevant next, because that's the way war goes. Anyway, um, community guidance this week. What to focus on according to the cards? Really kind of intense. So, as I recall, last week was around really hooking into your compassion, compassion for yourself and others, um, and remembering that um, we don't get to rest after defeats, but we get to re-strategize things and maybe, hold that in compassion. How will love, if we ground ourselves in love, how can that advance um, what we need to do? Well, that was last week. This week, I have pick a card, any card.
Yoicks!
So it's the devil, death, and the seven of cups.
Holy shit!
So
If you don't mind me saying so.
Teresa has started to study tarot in the last couple of months. Um, no, it's okay.
Good then.
It's just a little intense. So the devil card really talks about
You can have a shovel around here somewhere,
for what?
digging a hole to get myself.
And you got to make sure you put the dirt on top. It's the dirt that does it.
I'm gonna hide like Saddam Hussein.
So the devil talks about really looking at how we keep ourselves prisoner. What behaviors are keeping you from doing what you need to do? Um, a lot of us have fairly unhealthy coping mechanisms. Is there an addiction issue that you might need to deal with? Are you numbing yourself out through television or say video games, my personal favorite? Or are you keeping yourself from actually feeling the horror that is surrounding us? Um, the devil card is about numbing out. It's about being enslaved to unhealthy desires. It's about not noticing that you actually have the key to freeing yourself, and freeing yourself means to actively engage in your life as somebody who is in the driver's seat, taking control of your life again instead of hiding and numbing. Though it's definitely a noted, tried and true response to take a hole and bury yourself for a moment, because
Okay.
the news is kind of horrific. But don't numb yourself out, right? Don't numb yourself out. Um, don't we all, Kitty? Don't we all? But no, we must engage. And this, we have the death card. Um, death is around transformation, it's around changing, it's around making deep and lasting changes in our lives. It's about um, transitions and new beginnings. It's about closing out chapters and opening chapters, right? So we have to quit numbing ourselves. Um, Look, it's a cat.
That's a warplane too.
For those at home, you may not have just heard the rumbling over our house. I don't know that the mic would have picked that up, but let's just say it was really quite loud and actually kind of shook our house for a moment, which is why the kitty jumped up. Um, she does not like the sound of warplanes. We don't either. So quit numbing ourselves out. Do what we need to do to transition our own lives and put ourselves back in the driver's seat. And the Seven of Cups is around having really, really huge visions, big dreams, but that we need to ground them, right? We need to make sure that they are grounded in pragmatism. Otherwise, we start drifting off, and I'm really not against tilting at windmills. I think tilting at windmills is a really important pastime, but it is important to look around you, read the room, and do something pragmatic. For myself, it's probably looking a lot like volunteering for Joanne Hardisty's campaign, as opposed to sitting on the sidelines and saying no elected politician has gotten everything right and therefore none of them get my support. I think this can be a card of ideologues, right? Of purists. You have the dream vision. We know what utopia looks like. And since you are not acting like you're in utopia yet, fuck you, right? We can't do that because we don't live in utopia. And so that is, we pull ourselves towards our visions, but we ground them in what we can achieve today, and then we go a little bit further tomorrow and next week, and that's how we actually keep keep moving forward. Not numbing, controlling our own lives, um, taking our dreams and making them into pragmatic action.
And one of those pragmatic actions has got to be voting for Joanne. The more we reelect her, the closer she gets to being police commissioner. And I would love to see that day. Already, the police hate her so much that they, have tried to smear her. And I fear for her life with these guys. So we need to support her as much as we can.
Yeah, and well, that's for a whole nother show. But she has certainly done more on city council. Hi, Libby, you're on the camera. She's actually certainly done more on city council for the good than anyone in a couple of decades, by my estimation, as somebody who's lived in Portland all of my 55 years. Right. So with that,
I think we're done. Okay. So
say the thing you say.
Thanks for tuning in. Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.
And we'll be back next week. Cheers.